a shot of Detroit from Windsor. It's a little after 7 o'clock. I'm in downtown Windsor. I'm going to catch the bus to go to Detroit. I say downtown Windsor in quotes. It's a small city, but this is the downtown of it. I was up today about 10. Didn't really do much besides edit the previous two. I was a little bit behind. As you can see, it was kind of a continuum. I didn't quite get done, but I think it's only another day, although I've been saying that for literally months. So we'll have to see. It's not much further to the bus stop here, and this is a more secluded spot, although it's quite windy out. The weather here has been up and down since I moved in. It's about 10 degrees, which is, well, I'm speaking in Celsius here, foreign language to some, although the metric system is far more rational. I'm sure all who can think can agree. So yeah, it's only about 10 degrees out, but it's windy. The wind gets it to around the freezing mark, which in the rational system of temperature is 0. See how that makes sense? Freezes at 0. 32 point something. Makes no sense. Okay. So yeah, it's windy. I don't know how much of this is going to get picked up, but we'll find out. Taking the bus is not my choice. I would rather walk. If there was an option available, there's two ways to Detroit from Windsor. You can either take the bridge, which is a good ways that way, or you can take the tunnel. The bridge does not allow people to walk because there was a string of suicide jumps in the 70s. And it's privately owned, so they can make silly rules like that. The guy that owns the bridge is a pain in the ass to the city, the province, the feds. They're actually just building another bridge. Won't be done for a while though. So the only other way across is through a tunnel, and you can't walk under there because, well, the reason is they say there's not enough space, but looks to me like they can make space. They just don't want people walking under there. I think that they get a significant amount of revenue from that whole bus, so it's more along the lines of that. So yeah, the bus comes about every half hour at this time of night. Actually, I think it comes every half hour. Hope it comes every half hour, because I'm going to be just on time. I'm going to Detroit, actually somewhere I haven't been before, to catch a jazz band. It's kind of a super group with the drummer from the Smashing Pumpkins, the original drummer from the Smashing Pumpkins. Yeah, it's every half hour. Okay, good. Actually, it's every half hour all night. It's good. Okay. The original drummer from the Smashing Pumpkins, along with it's the bus station in Windsor, if you're curious. A bassist from a supergroup in the 70s called Brand X. He also did a lot of work with Brian Eno. There's a member of Megadeth and a member of a band called Kneebody, along with the front guy who's a sax player. I'm not entirely sure what to expect. I'm really just going to get a shot at Jimmy Chamberlain from a few feet away. Grew up a big Pumpkins fan, so that's kind of a treat for me. And I guess I'm trying to wait for the bus, so this is coming off. So the bus loops, very short trip through downtown, around into a kind of secret entrance to the tunnel. I would have caught it, but I'm not expecting to get much besides the glare. I don't think I'm even. Oh, seems a bit better now. This is entering into the border crossing here. This is unusual. I'm not used to a lineup here. I guess they only got one open tonight. Is it maybe a hockey game? It's about that time of year for a hockey game. Of course, number one, I'm in Canada, and number two, I'm right beside Detroit. These two things together create a climate that is quite inducive to much hockeyness. It looks like I'm going to be here for a few minutes, unfortunately. I hope I don't miss the show. Okay, it seems like it's busy on the way back, but not the way in. Can't really explain that besides people just coming home from work, I guess. Anyways, I'm going to the tunnel and it looks pretty clear, so it's no problem. It's quite the lineup though on the way in. Let's see. This is a tunnel under the Detroit River, or through the Detroit River, which is a body of water that connects Lake Huron to Lake Erie. There's a lake in the middle called Lake St. Clair, but it's piddling little lakes trying to compete now. Alright, there's a little turn here. Next thing that happens is I need to go through customs. It's always been a painless procedure for me. I don't look very scary. But I don't want to even talk about cameras in customs. So I'll just go ahead and turn that off when I get around the corner here. And here I am. So it's midnight, and I'm safe back at home in Canada. I didn't get any shots of Detroit. And I have to admit that the reason is because I'm still a little bit apprehensive about walking around in Detroit with a camera in my hand. I've been here for about 2 years now, but I've only been able to get over to Detroit for about a year. You know, border documents had to come through and stuff, so I've had about a year's worth of going to Detroit, you know, off and on. It depends on the concert schedule, really. And I am getting a lot more comfortable with it, but at the same time, something that's really apparent to me is that walking around in Detroit requires your attention. It's not the kind of thing that I think is... Let me phrase it like this. Walking anywhere is dangerous. Doesn't matter where you're walking. If you're walking in a park beside your house, it's still dangerous, right? It's a question of measuring the level of dangerousness. Um, in any commute whatsoever, there are risks, and those risks occur at higher proportions in some circumstances than in others. So the question isn't whether Detroit is dangerous on an absolute level, it's whether it's dangerous on a relative level compared to other places. And I haven't got the impression that it is substantially so. I've noticed that there are greater challenges walking in maintaining safe distances, um, in interpreting people from a distance, which is necessary when you're walking. Um, I'll get to that in a minute. That's kind of another topic that's going to come out of this one. What I'm trying to say is that I'm less concerned in Detroit about being, caught in a bad situation, and more worried about being distracted from preventing myself being caught in a bad situation. Um, it's certainly easy to see possible difficult scenarios, but I haven't run into a situation yet where one of those difficult scenarios seems at all likely. So it's like you see greater possibilities of harm, but not a larger probability of harm. Um, because the solutions are trivial. So it's like if I was walking around in Ottawa, I would feel like I was walking on safe, solid ground. I don't have to worry about anything, right? I can basically do whatever I want without any real serious concern. When I'm walking around in Detroit, it's more like there's some minefields that you need to go around. There's a snake pit over there. But it's at a really facile level. It's like really obvious where the danger traps are and really obvious how to get around it. Um, so much more, far greater possibilities, but such an easy map that it's impossible to fuck up. Um, Maybe I'm exaggerating, but that's what it seems like to me, anyways. Um, Maybe hard to tell sometimes, but I do tend to test at high altitudes. So that might have some. Maybe it's too easy a map for me. That said, I mean, I've barely ventured off Woodward. I don't have the slightest idea about Detroit. I've never set foot in there. I see. I would avoid it. I know to avoid it, right? This is what I'm saying. It's like it's such an obvious snake pit that you know to go around it, right? You don't do that. So that but I mean, the closest I came to actually going to Detroit was the Loma Prieta concert last year, and I specifically said no because I'm not going there. I didn't see any safe bus route home, any place to shack at if I got stuck overnight, kind of thing, which is important when I'm heading to suburban Detroit because I'm stuck there. If the show ends at midnight and I'm in Pontiac, I'm not getting home until the morning. So even if it's in Ferndale, I'm still stuck. So yeah, I didn't want to go to that place. It didn't seem, and I might be completely exaggerating, but it like greater possibilities, but not greater probabilities. I I'd like to say that maybe it'll go away, that kind of apprehension, as time goes on, but what I'm kind of trying to explain is that it probably won't. Um, because it is necessary. It might not be seriously dangerous, or at least the places of Detroit that I'm walking through might not be seriously dangerous, but it is seriously necessary to ensure that you're aware enough that you're not walking into a dangerous situation. Um, so, or at least that's my perception of it. So the idea of me walking down, Detroit with a camera in my hand, panning all over the place, completely oblivious to what's happening around me, is something that I am going to seek to avoid in all circumstances outside of broad daylight. So, I mean, I'll try to get some shots to Detroit in, but it's going to have to be during the day. And then because I go to Detroit to see concerts, it probably won't be till the spring. Unless maybe I'm going to an early show in Ferndale or Pontiac. I can maybe get some shots on the way in. And on top of that, when you get past, when you go up Woodward far enough, then it seems like there's less snake bits. So maybe in Ferndale I might be more willing to get some shots in. But for right now, walking around in downtown Detroit, it's not that I'm worried about that somebody's going to really take my $40 camera and I have a cover. If anybody's like, hey, nice camera, it's going to be, actually it's live streaming. So you want to be on your best behavior because this is getting streamed to a hard drive. Oh, what's that? No. I think you should walk the other way because I'm just going to keep you right, wherever you're walking. And I think that'll probably work, remarkable as it is, unless I get a real oath. In which case, that's going to be trying to explain live streaming. But I think I'm willing to play the probabilities there. Again, this is one of the many possibilities that one needs to be aware of, but it's not a high, But I did have a plan. If I had brought it, I didn't feel comfortable taking my attention away at that kind of level. So it's gonna have to be during the day or out further in the suburbs, pretty much. The other thing you might want to ask is, you're a trans person, from a distance at least a queer person. Don't you feel a little bit extra apprehension in walking around in Detroit at night by yourself? And I was kind of thinking about that as I was walking and being concerned about my camera, or like I said, not really being concerned about the camera. I'm more being concerned about just not paying attention while somebody is maybe eyeing the camera. It's if I could be paying attention at the same time, maybe I'll even learn that skill. But I just didn't feel good about it. But as I was thinking about it, it kind of dawned on me that I do this. I walk around in dark places by myself all the time. And what I kind of came to the conclusion of, and that I actually concluded was a consequence, or sort of like was the cause of these other thoughts. These other thoughts were the consequence. There I am thinking faster than I can speak again. Is that somebody doesn't become transgendered the moment that they start taking hormones, right? A transgendered person is really a transgendered person for their whole life, and in the sense of, like, specifically in the sense of being safe in public. That's something that most trans people, regardless of at what point they identify or transition, something that most trans people deal with as very young. Because there's the same safety. I mean, they might exist on a different level, right? To an adult, it might exist on the level of sexual violence, whereas to a child, it might exist on the level of just brute force violence. But it's the same basic idea. So even as young as 5, 6 years old, as soon as you go to school, you're left learning in some way on how to fend for yourself, and it's probably the roughest sort of initiation that anybody. I mean, everybody goes through some kind of toughening up process, starting in kindergarten and, going through grade school. Everybody does. Regardless of what, kind of gender identity you're falling into. There, there's certainly, difficult issues for cis women to go through in the same period, for, dominant men to go through in the same period. They're all rather warped when you really analyze them, and they're all difficult, but, relatively speaking, the idea of, the initiation that a very young trans male goes through in that sort of alpha male period, it is. I'm not trying to get across an idea of victimhood here. I'm trying to get across an idea of adaptation, actually. You're gonna like my little twists here like this, especially you crazy conservatives who always want to come up with these ridiculous narratives that don't reflect reality in any way. You're gonna like my little twists and narratives because I'm gonna play with you, and you're gonna get burned if you're thinking ahead, and you're gonna sit on the other side of the screen and you're gonna go right, and that's good. That means that you get it, and maybe it might have been the only way he'd get it is by leading you on like that even. But that means that, yeah, it's too late. You already did it, and I've won. So, unless you want to boycott me, but you know what's happened here, right? Is I've lost my train of thought, which is something that happens. Don't be a statistic, Jay. Don't be a statistic, Jay. Don't. So yeah, trans people go, or all trans people, but specifically I'm talking about trans women, go through pretty rough stuff when they're young, and it does toughen them up. But in a way that some abstraction of something doesn't intend. But it does work in some sense. And maybe that's something that more women would actually benefit from. I'm not suggesting it's a biological response, I'm suggesting it's a social response. That trans people don't become trans people in this context when they start hormones become, or they have to deal with those same kinds of safety concerns their entire lives, whether they like it or not, and they learn how to deal with it. And like I say, maybe, or like I meant to say, or I was trying to say, I can't even remember, but at some point I wanted to say that maybe it's something that women don't go through, and might benefit from having greater stimulus so that they could adapt to that. It's mostly a question of avoidance versus conflict. And because you're constantly dealing with conflict, because that's the role of the, let's say, the Zeta male, you don't escape it. It's constant. It's perpetual, right? So you must adapt to it in some way. You must find ways to avoid it. And those skills that I always had on, how to interpret a situation quickly and walk around it, transfer over fairly cleanly. So I mean, do I feel that that's particularly dangerous? No, because I have many years experience in avoiding difficult situations.
I don't think I'm any worse off than anybody else would be walking in a situation like that. Probably better off because I'm so aware. Um, and you hear the obvious response. Um, that's male privilege, right? Um, I think that's largely misunderstanding it though. I mean, if you want to argue that there's and you will want to argue because you'll want to argue any point you can to demonstrate your point, no matter how far it comes from the core of the argument. You will argue into and any straw you can grasp at, you will argue. Um, so if you want to argue that um, I had the privilege to go through the adaptational process, well, I kind of conceded that a little bit. At the same time, I think it's a difficult thing to call privilege. Um, it's not. I mean, when I say I'm talking about, it's stimulating adaptation, that means it's not fun. Um, it forces you to really deal with shit. Um, so I mean, it's difficult. It's just difficult to call it privilege. um, in that context, even though I can see the point and think maybe that as awful as it sounds, that negative experience should perhaps be more widely shared. Um, but yeah, I don't. So long as I'm aware of what's going around me, I don't feel unsafe. I I know what to look for. I know how to pay attention. Um, so how was the show? Um, I'm glad I attended the show. I'm not in any way upset about it. Um, and I'm glad I attended the show because there were moments that were very interesting. Um, largely rooted around when the drummer and bassist kind of locked in and took over for a bit. Um, but large amounts of the show were kind of about trading solos. Um, and it always started, around the same way. They'd start with the piano, and then it would go to the bass solo, and then it would go to a drum build-up, right? Often, well, not often, but a few times a drum solo even. Um, on top of that, they did a few standards, but like as for songs of their own, they were just the same cycle around and jam kind of thing. Um, on top of that, the bassist, if anybody has footage of me, they might see me laughing at some of the bassist's parts. Um, let's say it was chromatic. Um, it sounded. I mean, jazz is chaotic at its best, but it has a certain theory underlying it, and it's not hard to tell when somebody is working within the constructs of that theory and just playing whatever just randomly plucking the notes on the string. Um, maybe not for everybody. Maybe it requires a certain musical background. But for somebody that has a musical background, it's not hard to tell when you're bullshitting. Um, and the bassist spent a good deal of the night completely bullshitting, and often bullshitting badly, in the sense that there was really no. Maybe I can put it like this. There's the kind of bullshitting that happens when you're trying to trick somebody of something. And there's the kind of bullshitting that happens when um, you are so confident in your wrongness, um, that the idea that you're bullshitting isn't even occurring to you. Um, the subconscious bullshitting, the unconscious bullshitting, the bullshitting in the second degree. Um, and that's kind of more what I got from this guy. It was more like he's just just confident. Like he's clearly hitting ridiculous notes and doing so with the full force of confidence that you could possibly pull up, right? And it was really the bravado and the bullshit that cracked me up. That said, it was often out of these runs of just total nonsense that some of the best parts came up. Um, he seemed to want to modulate between total nonsense and post rock riffs, which indicates where he's coming from. And the reality that the I mean his preferred melodic lines are punk rock tonic parts. But I mean the drums certainly worked well with that, and there was a part I think it was the last song where the build up kind of occurred, and you could hear where Chamberlain came in and expected the guitars. Um, it was this kind of weird moment, and you could feel everybody in the room got it, and that it might have been subconscious, but it was so clear that there was just no ambiguity about it. Um, it was just a certain snare, a certain roll followed by a certain snare attack that you've heard a million times attached to one of a chord and riff jumping in. Um, and like I said, the interesting part about it wasn't that it did. It was that you could tell that he was thinking that it was. That he was in that headspace at that moment. But of course there was no guitar on stage. So there was this sort of hollow emptiness for a split second. Because we all expected to hear that, that fuzzed slam. And yet it did not come. But here, this is the part that I wanted to get to. Um, he seemed to adjust to that. Like he seemed to realize that he was missing it, but instead of being like shit, and kind of freezing, he realized that it required a boost in intensity that only because there was no other instrument. There was a bass, a piano, and the piano was just like piddling around. And there's a sax which can't do that. The sax just doesn't boom. A piano could boom, but it wasn't going to. And the bass is already going. So, in order to get that, instead of kind of realizing, okay, what that fuzzed out guitar really is, and why everybody in the room was craving it, was because it was an increase in dynamics. It was a boost in energy, right? So realizing that what was missing was a boost in energy, he just played harder. And that was a real treat to see. Like I say, the draw tonight was to get to sit 5 feet in front of Jimmy Chamberlain, kind of somebody that was somebody that I have respect for as a musician. Let's say it like that. And watching that specific reaction at that specific point, to me that made checking out his jazz band, which maybe wasn't that good, worth doing. I think that's it for the night. Later. So, it's about 20 minutes to 4 in the morning, 3:40 a.m. And it was just finishing up the editing on that vlog for the evening. And it became clear that I was a little bit hungry. I'm not quite sure why I'm hungry tonight, but so be it. I went out of the store and I got me the ingredients that I required for my number one late night and hungry food, which is um, it's a type of nacho, and it's not particularly creative um, in much except for the basic ingredients of it. Okay, so those are the chips, and this is the brilliance of it. Normally, when you make nachos, you use those sort of plain old tortilla chips. I'm using two different types of Doritos here. One is the zesty cheese, and the other is the dill. Um, creates a split flavor right out of the chip itself, and that's really the major interesting part of this. Besides the toppings, I'll throw on afterwards. Um, Now, I do happen to have fresh tomatoes and green peppers in the house today, um, but I'm really not that excited about chopping it up right now. So I'm going to go with the lazy option, which is salsa. Um, I know salsa on nachos is surprising. I gotta put it down for a second while I layer it over. This is the spicy version, although it's not particularly spicy. Um, I like pretty spicy, and this is barely acceptable to be truthful. To be honest with you, to be truthy with you. Because this is a late night meal, I'm generally less concerned about proportions and things like this. So it's in the late night meals that I go over budget on things. Use half the jar of salsa when it'll only take 3 spoons, and etc. etc. Um, yeah, I think I'll be happy with you. I'm kind of half considering opening another jar, but I think this is probably good enough. And I'm not putting anything else on there right now except cheese, which, well, that's a two-hand job as well. Um, Once in a while I might put salami on there. Um, Not tonight. It's rare. Cheese in. Wasn't sure if I grated enough. I never am, but that looks pretty good. The remaining little bits out there. Fortunately, the container was a little bit wet from dishes this afternoon. Front to dry it. I may need to double layer this after. That's something that happens from time to time when making nachos. What it means is that you don't put quite enough cheese on top, and you have to grate some more cheese when you're half done. Happens with spaghetti sometimes too, but I think that's good for now. And there it is. Really just Doritos, salsa, and cheese. And make sure it's good and zapped. There you go. And the final ingredients on top are Caesar salad dressing and hot sauce. That gives it that little tang. Hot sauce and Caesar dressing is one of the best sauce combinations. That's something that you'll see on a number of the videos that I do, is this idea of sauce combinations. Um, I also use that same sauce combination in the spaghetti. Um,
and I'll use it in a few other places as well. Yeah, there's late night nachos after our concert. Perfect meal.